All right, you guys, it's Elevated here. I'm actually really excited for today's topic. We're going to be talking about conflict, and this is a new idea that I've been playing around with, especially over the past year, really trying to examine it. So I'm really excited to dive into it today. So there's two main parts to this, and then we'll be finishing up with some memes at the end. But so the first part, we're going to be talking about Leo Tolstoy's "The Kingdom of God is Within You" and kind of exploring that text. I've got a couple excerpts from some other people too, um, but most of it is going to be from that book. And then the second part, we're going to be talking about Attack on Titan. It's an anime TV show. It's actually the only anime I've ever watched, but it's really good. I'm gonna be focusing because I haven't read the manga or the comic. I'm gonna be focusing mainly on the show and what all has been released so far. I'm aware that there's probably more storyline that obviously if you've seen the show, obviously there's more storyline uh, that probably affects the show. But you'll see it actually doesn't affect. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the topic today anyway. So yeah, conflict is what we're going to be talking about today, and just the idea of kind of break it down. The idea of war, fighting for good. So basically, we're going to sum it up as if you're fighting for good, you're not doing good because you're fighting. And that pretty much sums it up as best as I can into one sentence. So yeah, we're gonna start with the kingdom of God is within you, and I've highlighted the important parts, but I'm pretty much just gonna read word for word and then kind of add in my input whenever I feel like it. So yeah, this is chapter 1's the doctrine of non-resistance to evil by force. Has been professed by a minority of men from the very foundation of Christianity. In a whole series of arguments in text showing that war, that is, the wounding and killing of men, is inconsistent with a religion founded on peace and goodwill towards men. Obviously, this is a topic a lot of people kind of just brush under the rug or don't really think about. Jesus said, "Do not kill," but it's okay to kill for your country. Yeah, we're going to be tearing that down today. So the Quakers maintain and prove that nothing has contributed so much to the obscuring of Christian truth in the eyes of the heathen. Nowadays, POC, we would just call them atheists, I guess, or pagans or whatever they decide to be. Literally, everyone else who isn't Christian is a heathen. And has hindered so much the diffusion of Christianity through the world. We're going to be talking about that later when I bring it up. As the disregard of this command by men calling themselves Christians and the permission of war and violence to Christians. So basically saying nothing has contributed to the obscuring of Christian truth. A lot of the times when people talk smack about Christianity, they're actually just talking smack about how Christians don't really follow what did Gandhi say? Someone asked him what he thought of Christianity. He said, "I really like your Christ. I don't really like your Christians all that much." So yeah, basically, yeah. So the obscuring of Christian truth in the eyes of the heathen is obviously the disregard of men calling themselves Christians, the permission of war and violence. So Christians who want to put up a war against homosexuals, for example, obviously that's gonna bring them further away from Christ's teaching, right? And that's the complete opposite of what you're supposed to be doing. From some levels of understanding, I should say, because I don't really profess that, honestly. But yeah, Christ's teaching, which came to be known to men not by means of violence and the sword, they say, but by means of non-resistance to evil, gentleness, meekness, and peaceableness, can only be diffused through the world by the example of peace, harmony, and love among its followers. So I highlighted that in blue, and you're going to be seeing more text like that later on. So this is actually going to be the topic of my next video in June, hopefully, where I break down being in the world, but not of the world. And that idea summed up in one sentence would be basically you are not put into this world to reform it, but to reform yourself. So most of the things that they say about like nonviolence and stuff, I agree with. But when they start talking about like, and they try to use sly words like this, like diffusion of the teaching of Christ or the spreading basically of any ideology, that's where it starts getting dicey. And I'm going to break that down next month. But yeah, just a heads up. So yeah, a Christian, according to the teaching of God himself, can act only peaceably toward all men, and therefore there can be no authority able to force the Christian to act in opposition to the teaching of God and to the principal virtue of the Christian in relation with his neighbors. So this is from My American Gods video, the Kingdom of Heaven, where he says, howsoever you are played, even if these people pretend themselves to be kings or men of power, you cannot stand before God and say, but I was told to do thus, or that virtue was inconvenient at the time. I pretty much have that memorized. That's really funny. But yeah, that's saying the same thing. Like you if you're a true Christian, like you can't have this as an excuse. Basically. So yeah, the law of state necessity, they say, can force only those to change the law of God who, for the sake of earthly gains, try to reconcile the irreconcilable. Let's read that again. So yeah, only this law of state necessity can force only those to change the law of God who, for the sake of earthly gains, try to reconcile the irreconcilable. But for a Christian who sincerely believes that following Christ's teachings will give him salvation, such considerations of state can have no force. I almost want to say that's like self-explanatory, but I know I probably need to break it down a little more. So basically, the law of state necessity right here kind of means like the law, like if you're drafted to go into war or face jail time, basically. It's like they can only the people who decide to change the law of God in their minds are seeking earthly gains. So like we're gonna break it down more, but such considerations of state can have no force. So even if the state forces you to go to jail or get drafted into the military, a Christian who sincerely believes Christ's teachings will bring him salvation, like it shouldn't affect his decision. Like he should not be killing anyways. So yeah. Further acquaintance with the labors of the Quakers and their works with Fox, Penn, and especially the work of Diamond showed me not only that the impossibility of reconciling Christianity with force and war had been recognized long ago, but that this irreconcilability had been long ago proved so clearly and so indubitably that one could only wonder how this impossible reconciliation of Christian teaching with the use of force, which has been and still is preached in the churches, could have been maintained in spite of it. One could only wonder. Yeah, that's really funny. So he's basically ripping them up. Like this has already been addressed all throughout history, and it's been addressed so indubitably that it really is a complete wonder how people could still like confuse themselves into thinking killing in the name of a country is okay. So yeah, we go on to. This is really interesting. The son of William Lloyd Garrison, the famous champion of the emancipation of the Negroes, wrote to me that he had read my book, in which this is still Tolstoy, by the way, in which he found ideas similar to those expressed by his father in the year 1838. And that thinking it would be interesting to me to know this, he sent me a declaration or proclamation of non-resistance drawn up by his father nearly 50 years ago. This declaration came about under the following circumstances. William Lloyd Garrison took part in a discussion on the means of suppressing war in that society in 1838. He came to the conclusion that the establishment, so this is what I mean, how they try to use like sneaky words, the establishment of universal peace can only be found on the open profession of the doctrine of non-resistance. Why do we not have it? Okay. So wondering why I was getting cut off at the bottom. All right. Non-resistance to evil by violence in its full significance as understood by the... Okay, yeah. Lost my train of thought. But yeah, this is where I was talking about how they... try to sneak that. Like, it's still... It's still a display of force. So, like... I know we're opening up this topic about conflict, and we're talking about like killing in the name of a country, like being a soldier, but essentially you'll see that like any imposition of force or any force is not okay, but they still try to sneak by it by saying like the establishment of universal peace or the promotion of peace on earth. Like if you're still like trying to promote peace and goodwill, it's in the same vein, it's still fighting for good, and it's just not gonna work out. It's if you're fighting, it's not good. Even if you try to disguise your fighting as like I said, establishment or promotion. So this is William Lloyd Garrison. This is his declaration of sentiments. I'm going to dive into it. Assembled in convention from various sections of the American Union for the promotion of peace on earth and goodwill among men, we the undersigned regard it as due to ourselves, to the cause which we love, to the country in which we live, and to the world, to publish a declaration expressive of the principles we cherish, the purposes we aim to accomplish, and the measures we shall adopt to carry forward the work of peaceful and universal reformation. See, like I said earlier, the sentence, if the sentence can be broken down, if this topic can be broken down into one sentence, you're not here for universal reformation. You're here for individual spiritual reformation. So yeah, this is how he starts out this declaration. We cannot acknowledge allegiance to any human government, neither can we oppose any such government by resort to physical force. We recognize but one king and lawgiver, one judge and ruler of mankind. We are bound by the laws of a kingdom which is not of this world, the subjects of which are forbidden to fight, in which mercy and truth are met together, and righteousness and peace have kissed each other, which has no state lines, no national partitions, and no geographical boundaries, in which there is no distinction of rank or division of caste or inequality of sex, the officers of which are peace, its extractors righteousness, its walls salvation, and its gates praise, and which is destined to break in pieces and consume all other kingdoms. I should really read ahead in my mind before I read, because that was unnecessary. But yeah, he starts out very boldly. We cannot acknowledge allegiance to any human government, neither can we oppose it with any physical force. We are bound by the laws of a kingdom which is not of this world, the subjects of which are forbidden to fight. It really is just that simple. Our country is the world, our countrymen are all mankind. We love the land of our nativity only as we love all other lands. The interests, rights, and liberties of American citizens are no more dear to us than are those of the whole human race. Hence, we can allow no appeal to patriotism to revenge any national insult or injury. The Prince of Peace, under whose stainless banner we rally, came not to destroy, but to save even the worst of enemies. He has left us an example so that we should follow his steps. We can see that if a nation has no right to defend itself against foreign enemies or to punish its invaders, no individual possesses that right in his own case. The unit cannot be of greater importance than the aggregate. If one man may take life to obtain or defend his rights, the same license must necessarily be granted to communities, states, and nations. No obligation can rest upon Americans to regard foreigners as more sacred in their persons than themselves, or to give them a monopoly of wrongdoing with impunity. The dogma that all the governments of the world are approvingly ordained of God, and that the powers that be in the United States, in Russia, or in Turkey are in accordance with his will, is not less absurd than impious. It makes the impartial author of human freedom and equality unequal and tyrannical. It cannot be affirmed that the powers that be in any nation are actuated by the Spirit or guided by the example of Christ in the treatment of enemies. Therefore, they cannot be agreeable to the will of God, and therefore their overthrow by a spiritual regeneration of their subjects is inevitable. So basically saying the dogma that all governments are ordained by God, if you're talking about the Christian God and your government has soldiers, then no, it's not. Basically is all that sentence says, or all that paragraph says. We register our testimony not only against all wars, whether offensive or defensive, but against all preparations for war, against every naval ship, every arsenal, and every fortification, against the militia system and a standing army, against all military chieftains and soldiers, against all monuments commemorative of victory over a foreign foe, all trophies won in battle, and all celebrations in honor of military or naval exploits, against all appropriations for the defense of a nation by force and arms on the part of any legislative body, and against every edict of government requiring of its subjects military service. So not only does William Lloyd Garrison profess that a nation isn't allowed to use force, but even just the preparation for force is also, they stand against that. Hence, we deem it unlawful to bear arms or to hold a military office. As every human government is upheld by physical strength, and its laws are enforced virtually at the point of the bayonet, we cannot hold any office which imposes upon its incumbent the obligation to do right on the pain of imprisonment or death. They can't even hold the office to try and change the law to make it better, basically, or quote unquote better. We therefore voluntarily exclude ourselves from every legislative and judicial body and repudiate all human politics, worldly honors, and stations of authority. If we cannot occupy a seat in the legislature or on the bench, neither can they even elect others to act as our substitutes in any such capacity. So not only can they not run for office, political office, they can't even vote because the vote comes with an underlying threat of force. It follows that we cannot sue any man at law to compel him by force to restore anything which he may have wrongfully taken from us or others. Like it says in the Bible, if he has seized our coat, we shall surrender up our cloak rather than subject him to punishment. We believe that the penal code of the old covenant, covenant, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, has been abrogated by Jesus Christ, and that under the new covenant, the forgiveness instead of the punishment of enemies has been enjoined upon all his disciples in all cases whatsoever. It literally, it's this is coming like this is people are like, oh, this doesn't make sense, and it's like, well, yeah, because like they say you can't be completely peaceful in this world. It's like you can. It just requires sacrifice, basically. To extort money from enemies, set them upon a pillory, cast them into prison, or hang them upon a gallows is obviously not to forgive, but to take retribution. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. So if you're not here to gain vengeance on others for anything, you are here to reform yourself. Like, yeah. The history of mankind is crowded with evidences proving that physical coercion is not adapted to moral regeneration. Yeah, basically, like, we're going to look in 100 years and be like, wow, we actually held people in prisons, in the cells, and completely restricted all of their activities. Like, that's going to be just about as barbaric as us looking at medieval torture devices. Like, it's barbaric because it's not solving anything. They're not being criminals are not being like, it's literally you're just get punishment is the worst type of what do they call it? Negative reinforcement and negative punishment or positive punishment. The best way to train, like, what is it for? Positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment. Positive reinforcement is by far the best way to quote unquote train people. Punishment is very, very ineffective. So yeah. The sinful disposition of man can be subdued only by love. Evil can be exterminated from the earth only by goodness. This, right earlier. The history of mankind is crowded with evidences proving that it is not safe to rely upon an arm of flesh, upon man whose breath is in his nostrils, to preserve us from harm. That there is a great security in being gentle, harmless, long-suffering, and abundant in mercy. And that is only the meek who shall inherit the earth, for the violent who resort to the sword shall perish with the sword. Hence, as a measure of sound policy, of safety to property, life, and liberty, and of public quietude and private enjoyment, as well as the grounds of allegiance to him who is King of kings and Lord of lords, we cordially adopt the non-resistance principle, being confident that it provides for all possible consequences, will ensure all things needful to us, is armed with omnipotent power, and must ultimately triumph over every assailing force. This non-resistance principle, I'm not sure where Tolstoy fits on the timeline, but Henry David Thoreau wrote Civil Disobedience in like the mid-1800s. Gandhi took a couple pages literally out of his book. And I bet... I wonder if Gandhi and Tolstoy lived at the same time. I'm not really that good at history. But yeah, Martin Luther King's Letter from a Birmingham Jail. All of these espouse the same principle of non-resistance, civil disobedience, peaceful protest, basically. Yeah, protest, I would put in one of these blue text. But yeah. We advocate no Jacobinical doctrines. The spirit of Jacobinism is a spirit of retaliation, violence, and murder. It neither fears God nor regards man. We would be filled with the spirit of Christ. If we abide by our principles, it is impossible for us to be disorderly, plot treason, or participate in any evil work. We shall submit to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, obey all the requirements of government except such as we deem contrary to the commands of the gospel, and in no wise resist the operation of law, except by meekly submitting to the penalty of disobedience. The only acceptable way to resist the operation of law. Yeah, I would still agree with this. Yeah. While we shall adhere to the doctrines of non-resistance and passive submission to enemies, we purpose in a moral and spiritual sense to speak and act boldly in the cause of God, to assail iniquity in high places and in low places. So yeah, this is what this is still fighting for good, forcing good, just with prettier language, basically. Speak and act boldly in the cause of God. Like you're still resisting. You're still trying to apply force. Again, more pretty language. We expect to prevail through the foolish prevail. We expect to prevail. From the press, we shall promulgate our sentiments as widely as practicable. We shall endeavor to secure the cooperation of all persons of whatever name or sect. Just more. Like you're still fighting for good. In entering upon the great work before us, we are not unmindful that in its prosecution we may be called to test our sincerity, even as in a fiery ordeal. Yeah, anytime you try to tell someone you are, you don't believe in violence, or you're non-violent, or you're non-resistant, like it's funny how like a lot of people's first reaction is to test you. It's to they test your boundaries, or they try to like tease you, or do this or that to really just like see if you're if you profess this or not. Like I don't know what it is about fucking humans, but yeah, it's really sadistic in a way, honestly. To just be like, oh, you're not better than me, look at you, you'll fucking you'll react if I push you. Like, come on. It may subject us to insults, outrage, suffering, and even death itself. We anticipate no small amount of misconception, misrepresentation, and calumny. Tumults may arise against us. Yeah, misconception. Oh, so you're just a pushover, huh? Like you're just weak. You have no spine. Yeah. Misconception, misrepresentation. Tumults may arise against us. The ungodly and violent, the proud and pharisaical, the ambitious and tyrannical, principalities and powers and spiritual wickedness in high places may combine to crush us. So they treated the Messiah, whose examples we are humbly striving to imitate. Yeah, that's just human nature. More Jesus talk. Blah, blah, blah. I don't mean to like, okay, a lot of this is coming from like Christianity's perspective, but we're going to be breaking it, hopefully I'm going to be breaking it down more to where it's like you should be aware of this, just from a purely metaphysical, philosophical, like secular perspective too. I always try to combine both. So the spiritual perspective and the secular perspective, because they essentially like you can come to the same conclusions no matter what path. It's Jainism again, like it just comes back to that. Firmly relying upon the certain and universal triumph of the sentiments contained in this declaration, however formidable may be the opposition arrayed against them, in solemn testimony of our faith in their divine origin, we hereby affix our signatures to it, commending it to the reason and conscience of mankind, giving ourselves no anxiety as to what may befall us. and resolving in the strength of the Lord God calmly and meekly to abide the issue. So this is kind of right here. So basically they're just like, we're writing all this and we're giving ourselves no anxiety as to what may happen to us for professing this, even though people may be, and they may insult us, they may cause outrage, suffering, and even death, bring us death. We give ourselves no anxiety as to what may befall us. That's the kind of mindset you want to have with this. Yeah. That's what, 2? Catechism of Non-Resistance. Catechism. So this is this is still from Tolstoy. He's just taken an excerpt from Adin Bayou's Catechism of Non-Resistance. And it's a Q&A. I think this was like a reporter, like in a newspaper or something back in like the early 1800s. I'm not sure. But yeah, so he breaks this down a lot more. The understanding of, kind of just went right into it with this, though. It's like it's basically like not only can a country not have soldiers to fight in war, but also even just defending yourself is considered wrong in the eyes of these Christians. And this is going to break down exactly why. So wherein lies the chief significance of the doctrine of non-resistance? In the fact that it alone allows of the possibility of eradicating evil from one's own heart. Again, you're here to reform yourself, not the world. And also from one's neighbors. That should be a blue text. This doctrine forbids doing that whereby evil has endured for ages and multiplied in the world. Doing that whereby evil has endured for ages. Let me try and highlight that. I don't know why it's messing up. This is something we're going to be really exploring, how like fighting for good is wrong, not just because it's fighting, but because like it really does promulgate evil. Like, it's not just that, standing up for yourself is wrong. It's that fighting, it's done with a certain mindset. It's very destructive and actually perpetuates this cycle. He who attacks another and injures him kindles in the other a feeling of hatred, the root of every evil. To injure another because he has injured us, even with the aim of overcoming evil, is doubling the harm for him and for oneself. It is begetting, or at least setting free and inciting, that evil spirit which we should wish to drive out. So if you're fighting for good, you're bringing that spirit in, which which good is supposed to be fighting against. Like, it's like opening Pandora's box. Satan can never be driven out by Satan. Error can never be corrected by error, and evil cannot be vanquished by evil. Simple. It's simple. True non-resistance is the only real resistance to evil. It is crushing the serpent's head. I think that's very important. Crushing the serpent's head. It destroys and in the end extirpates, roots out, and destroys completely the evil feeling. If that is a true meaning of the rule of non-resistance, can it always be put into practice? It can be put into practice like every virtue enjoined by the law of God. A virtue cannot be practiced in all circumstances without self-sacrifice, privation, suffering, and in extreme cases, loss of life itself. If it was easy to do, it probably wouldn't be a virtue. But he who esteems life more than fulfilling the will of God is already dead to the only true life. So if you really if you're like, oh, the government's going to put me in jail if I don't do this, and if you're like valuing your own life over virtues of God, then you're Your life ain't worth shit. Trying to save his life, he loses it. Besides, generally speaking, where non resistance costs the sacrifice of a single life or of some material welfare, resistance costs 1,000 such sacrifices. Now, that one, I don't know if I'm going to be talking about it much in Attack on Titan, but yeah. Basically, if you're like starting up a like Star Wars, if you're starting up a rebellion or resistance, like if we're talking about like just based on the number of lives sacrificed, the Empire probably, if they just let the Empire exist, they would have saved more lives than trying to resist the Empire. But yeah, non-resistance is salvation, resistance is ruin. It is incomparably less dangerous to act justly than unjustly, to submit to injuries than to resist them with violence, less dangerous even in one's relations to the present life. More blue text. If all men refuse to resist evil by evil, our world would be happy. Our world's never going to be. The spiritual life is about overcoming the darker aspects of humanity a lot of the time. But as long as they are aspects of humanity, they're going to be stuck around. Like I said, you're here to reform yourself on an individual spiritual level. But so long as only a few act thus, what will happen to them? These are all typical, just like questions that people have. Like, well, you're gonna die if you profess this non-resistance stuff. You're gonna let people walk all over you, this and that. And it's like, well, yeah, obviously, because people are, yeah, but like, in the end, my spirit's gonna be all right, right? But yeah, if only one man acted thus and all the rest agreed to crucify him, would it not be nobler for him to die in the glory of non-resisting love, praying for his enemies, than to live to wear the crown of Caesar stained with the blood of the slain? Like, yeah. Like, if if someone really tried to like threaten your life and you killed them to protect your life, like, could you really live with yourself? A lot of people could, but again, a lot of people also are the ones who initiate violence, so there's that. However, one man or 1,000 men firmly resolved not to oppose evil by evil are far more free from danger by violence than those who resort to violence, whether among civilized or savage neighbors. The robber, the murderer, and the cheat will leave them in peace, sooner than those who oppose them with arms. That's kind of, yeah, like a... well, I don't know about a robber, but like a murderer is probably going to, or a cheat for sure, is probably going to oppose someone who opposes them with violence. And those who take up the sword shall perish by the sword, but those who seek after peace, for the most part, enjoy peace, or if they die blessed. And then more blue text. If there were a moderately large minority of such men, they would exercise such a salutary moral influence on society that every cruel punishment would be abolished and violence and feud would be replaced by peace and love. Yeah, no, this isn't gonna... this is... what do they call it? The Kobayashi Maru from Star Trek is the virtual test that they have. What am I trying to say? Where it's like it's a test that they gave to like Captain Kirk and all the other captains. Where it's like the mission is doomed to failure, and they're really just testing how you respond to that failure. Like you can sit there and try to succeed and whatnot. So basically, that's the kind of mindset you want to have with this. Like, you don't want to sit here and like fight for the good of the world. Like, you don't want to sit here and be like, oh, we're just here to, or what am I trying to say? You don't want to sit here and delude yourself into thinking that the world will eventually become good. Like, accept the facts that the world isn't going to become good, but still try to do good in it anyways, and you will go a lot farther than trying to fight for good. So yeah. Even if there were only a small minority of them, which there always will be, they would rarely experience anything worse than the world's contempt. And meantime, the world, though unconscious of it and not grateful for it, never grateful for it, would be continually becoming wiser and better for their unseen action on it. Yeah. And if the worst case, some members of the minority were persecuted to death, in dying for the truth, they would have left behind them their doctrine, which is like, again, like you're just trying to leave it behind to change the world, or like contribute to the changing of the world. Which is why me personally, like this YouTube channel, I'm not. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm doing here, like I said, for. These are things I would teach to my child if I had decided to have one, but I'm not. And it really is just here maybe for like the random people that through luck or serendipity happen to find it might help you, but it's not here to change the world. And honestly, if I ever get like more than like 1,000 subscribers, I'll probably just delete the channel, because it's not it's not meant for the world. Like I said, the world is not going to be grateful for it. This is literally just, it's literally just a work of passion. That's probably gonna die with me at the end of this. But yeah. So yeah, that really breaks down a lot. Really tears down like all the obvious like questions like of like oh, what if you can't be non-resistant to evil, you're gonna let evil win. It's like no, you trying to you trying to conquer evil. The conquering is the desire for conquering is what's evil. So yeah. One sec, I gotta check my notes, because I think I had something else to add to all of this. No. Okay. So yeah, this is from this actually isn't from Tolstoy. This is from Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl was a psychologist, I want to say, or a therapist, or some type of scholar like that. He actually lived through the Holocaust and in a camp. So this is his text that he wrote about that experience. So a human being is not one thing among others. Things determine each other, but man is ultimately self-determining. What he becomes within the limits of endowment and environment, he has made out of himself. In the camps, for example, in this living laboratory and on this testing ground, we watched and witnessed some of our comrades behave like swine, while others behaved like saints. Man has both potentialities within himself. Which one is actualized depends on decisions, but not on conditions. Even though conditions such as lack of sleep, insufficient food, and various mental stresses may suggest that the inmates were bound to react in certain ways, in the final analysis, it becomes clear that the sort of person the prisoner became was the result of an inner decision and not the result of camp influences alone. Our generation is realistic, for we have come to know man as he really is. After all, man is that being who invented the gas chambers of Auschwitz. However, he is also that being who entered those chambers upright with the Lord's Prayer or the Shema Yisrael on his lips. Whew. Man. I want to double check something because I really thought this had more. I guess not, though. No, yeah, that was all of it. Okay. So yeah. Um yeah, I already finished that. Okay. So this excerpt is another page out of Tolstoy's, and this is another breakdown of like the nature of humans, the like the bucket of crab scenario where they just like they see you um, behaving in a higher spiritual way and they just want to drag you back down. So yeah, it is well known that there are many persons in the United States who refuse to fight on grounds of conscience. They are called the defenseless or non-resistant Christians. These Christians refuse to defend their country, to bear arms, or at the call of government to make war on its enemies. Till lately, this religious scruple seemed a valid excuse to the government, and those who urged it were let off service. But at the beginning of our Civil War, public opinion was agitated on this subject. So that's probably when it started in the US, if you wanted a little history lesson right there. Excuse me. It was natural that persons who considered it their duty to bear all the hardships and dangers of war in defense of their country should feel resentment against those persons who had for long shared with them the advantages of the protection of the government, and who now, in time of need and danger, would not share in bearing the labors and dangers of its defense. So people who are take pride in themselves for fighting for freedom, like obviously they're gonna look at the people who enjoy that freedom but choose not to fight as like, oh, you're just a bunch of freeloaders. Like, like he says, it was even natural that they should declare the attitude of such men monstrous, irrational, and suspicious. When it's like no one asked you. You're the one fighting for war, and you want to call the attitude of being peaceful monstrous? Like, it's really funny, really irrational too. I've noticed that a lot of people, whenever they like talk smack about some particular group that they don't like, they always tend to use terms that could easily describe themselves. So yeah. This is for Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil. And he's just breaking this down as well. Our deepest insights must and should appear as follies and under certain circumstances as crimes when they come unauthorizedly to the ears of those who are not disposed and predestined for them. And I think that's all I highlighted from this excerpt. Oh, yeah. So I'll go ahead and read all this then. The exoteric and the esoteric, as they are formally distinguished by philosophers. So basically all this is saying right here is that, so there's the exoteric class, which is like the basic like fundamentalist Christian understanding of religion, and then there's the esoteric class, which is like the deeper understanding, people who actually sit here and practice non-resistance to evil and understand all of this teaching as described by Jesus in the Bible. And what he's saying right here is basically like there's more distinction between the fundamentalist Christians and quote-unquote true Christians than there are between like the esoteric. So like every religion is going to have exoteric and esoteric class. And what he's saying is that the esoteric classes of most religions are more similar to each other than the dichotomies between the religions themselves. So he's saying the exoteric class, standing without and viewing, estimating, measuring, and judging from the outside and not from the inside. The more essential distinction between the esoteric and the exoteric is that the class in question, the exoteric, view things from below upwards, while the esoteric class views things from above downwards. There are heights of the soul from which tragedy itself no longer appears to operate tragically. the Greeks called it a tragic comedy, comedic tragedy, which is essentially what it is. One of my biggest like mental breakdowns I've had was literally like me absolutely bawling and crying while at the same time laughing hysterically. It was very weird. It wasn't like I was crying so hard I was laughing, or I was laughing so hard I was crying. I was crying and laughing. I was in absolute sorrow and absolute like just humor about the state of like life itself. So yeah, that's what he's saying. There are heights of the soul from which tragedy itself no longer appears to operate tragically. And if all the woe in the world were taken together, who would declare to decide whether the sight of it would necessarily seduce and constrain to sympathy? And thus to a doubling of the woe. So he's saying that, yeah, like the world might be bad for what it is, but it's like, who says that requires your sympathy to, well, for the sympathy itself is a doubling of the woe, but like when that sympathy also leads to fighting for the people you have sympathy for, like that's probably like a quadrupling of the woe, honestly. That which serves the higher class of men for nourishment or refreshment must be almost poison to an entirely different and lower order of human beings. The virtues of the common man would perhaps mean vice and weakness in a philosopher. So yeah, these common men who think it's natural, or who think it's okay, or the common people who take pride in acts of war and serving their country. Are also is what he would consider the lower order of human beings. Because he's saying like those men view that the philosophical understanding is monstrous, irrational, and suspicious. Yeah, I think that's about it for Leo Tolstoy's work. So we're gonna do a spoiler alert because we're talking about Attack on Titan. I'm gonna be breaking down some scenes from the 3rd and the 4th season, including like some of the most recent episodes that came out. So if you haven't seen the show, like this is a very like plot heavy show. So if you want to watch it, go ahead. But like it's there's too much good content in there for me not to share it. So yeah, how they break it down is so there's these monstrous beings called Titans that plague the world. And at first, they're separate from humans, and you see them struggle fighting with that conflict, and then going through and fighting with internal conflicts with the humans and their government. And then you find out later on that there's an external conflict with other countries that were previously unknown or unmet before. So yeah, it's really good. So we start out with the history of this universe. So actually, yeah, we'll just break it down. So in this version, which is what most of the people on this planet are told, is what's her name? Emir Fritz made a contract with the devil to obtain the power of the Titans. So actually, it's a race of people who, upon her death, Emir's spirit was put into the the nine titans who formed the Eldian Empire. So this Eldian Empire. Eldia is the nation or the race of people who can transform into Titans due to this deal or contract that this ancient person made with the devil. After defeating the great nation of Marley, which is like the main other country in this conflict, they ruled over the continent, and thus began the Dark Ages. The subjects of Ymir called other races inferior and began to oppress them. They stole lands and fortunes, forced other races to bear their children. Their ethnic cleansing, to increase their numbers. Their ethnic cleansing continued for some 1,700 years. But then Marley, the original country that they overthrew, plotted to subvert Eldia from within. They brought 7 of the 9 Titans under their control and were victorious in the Great Titan War 80 years ago. The Eldian king at the time erected the 3 walls on the island of Paradis and fled there with many of his people. Our ancestors were abandoned and left behind on this continent. But the gracious people of Marley let us live and stay on their land. So, yeah. Let's see if I can, So the Eldian race basically were consigned back onto like an island to live there, separated from the rest of the world. The few people who didn't manage to go over there, they basically live in segregated communities in Marley. So Eldia is the empire and the race of Titans, and Marley's the empire that overthrew them. So he continues, and this kid is just like, blah, 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 blah. So basically what happened is, like, so his son, the guy who's talking and explaining this history, he's talking to his son because, like I said, they live in segregated communities. Him and his sister actually snuck out of that community to explore other places, and then some soldiers found them, and actually I think they ended up killing his sister. So he's sitting here and that's when the hatred sets in for him, and that's when he starts hating them. So he sits here and it gets really tense, blah, 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 blah. Oh, yeah, and then here's where he talks about, our ancestors did terrible things, the Eldians, the Titans. They believed in eugenics and tried to cleanse. And then he says, Frey and I did nothing like that. So you're going to see a lot of this in Attack on Titan, where they're always bringing up, like, the sins of the father are cursed onto the son, or whatever the phrase is. Where it's like, well, your ancestors did all these terrible things, and it's like, well, I did nothing of the sort, so why do I have to suffer this punishment? And that's basically what sparks the hatred in most of these people. It's like it's a constant cycle of, well, your ancestors did this to us, so we're gonna do this to you, and it's like, oh, well, you're doing this to me, so I'm gonna do this on your descendants, and it just continues the cycle of conflict. So yeah. Oh yeah, and this is one thing where he's like being the kid is being defiant, and the father is like, they'll ship us off to the island if we're wrong. So yeah, or if they're not free. Like I said, they're in segregated communities, and they're under very strict martial law. They're not citizens. He says, it doesn't matter that we're not directly responsible for the sins, but what we are able to do is live humble lives within this internment zone. I'm begging you, please don't lead us all to the same fate as Faye. I'm pretty sure she died. The kid says, I wonder who is truly in the wrong. Was it me or this world? Every time. That gets me. The world, blah, 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 blah. He finds an actual like underground movement, a patriot of Eldia, who tried to overthrow Marley's government for keeping them in these like segregated communities and keeping them under martial law, basically. So yeah, he's finding out about his sister's death. He joins the rebellion in order. Yeah. What did he say? When I learned the truth of my sister's death, I swore in my heart that I'd show them who the real devil was. Ah, there it is, right there. Like that's that's what you're really doing when you're engaging in conflict, when you're trying to quote unquote fight for good. Like at least he's being honest about it, you know. But yeah, that my ancestors had done the right thing. In order to correct the world again, always trying to correct the world, change the world. Eldia would have to be restored. Our informant was the owl. He led the restorationists. This is the truth. Okay, so we heard the first history, which is actually Marley's perspective of history, where the Eldia was a tyrannical, like they oppressed everybody, they committed genocide, they tried to do eugenics and this and that. And then this is the Eldian side, where they say, our founder Ymir awakened the power of the Titans, cultivated the wilds, built roads, and bridged the mountains. She helped the people prosper and develop this entire continent. So they they think that like LD is a good people, so it justifies their fight against Marley. Like you can always find justifications. This is why an eye for an eye, or fighting violence with violence. It's you can always justify it because it goes back. I know it because I believe in our founder Ymir. We are the chosen children of God, the subjects of Ymir, manifest destiny, and all this. Like, yeah. He meets his wife. She provided info about the times that only the royal family knew. Oh yeah, this is the image of Fritz, or I want to say this is their. I'm not sure, but I think this is their depiction of the quote unquote devil who gave them powers. So at the beginning, it's a devil, and then in their story, it's a god, basically. Where is it? There. Yeah. Pretty sure that and the devil are the same character. Oh, and I did want to mention this, by the way. So when the Eldian Empire was consigned to the island, said the king took the founding titan into the walls. If we obtain that, we can control all of the if he could wield the power of that absolute, why did he flee to an island? That is because he refused to fight. So there is, I do want to clarify that there is a difference between like non-resistance to evil and like being basically like running away from your problems. Like there is a difference between the two. And it's pretty much what the king did, was like consign his people to the island and pretty much postponed. He didn't really try to stop anything. The cycle of evil, he just postponed it. Will overthrow Marley and restore the pride of Eldia. You can't restore. Well, first of all, pride is a sin, but you can't really restore pride by doing shameful things. So yeah, I think that's really funny. Um, but oh yeah, the thing I wanted to point out about these histories is it's like they're actually going to explain it. They have a scene where it pretty much explains what I'm trying to get at. But like no matter, I always say this, no matter like what this world may be, whether these people were um, cursed by a devil or gifted with this power by an angel, um, either way, like it shouldn't change how they should act. So like if you're truly acting spiritually and you're truly like believe in this like non-resistance to evil, whether it's a curse by a devil or a gift from an angel, you should not be using it to apply force to other people. Cuz like it's yeah. Um we're going to break this down. This is a more of like an individual. So that first one was mainly about like the nations fighting in conflict. This is more of like an individual fighting in conflict. So this is two of the main characters, Eren and Reiner. And they talk about, so Reiner actually infiltrated the island that they were talking about, which is where Eren lived. Infiltrated the island and basically led to the death of his mother. So he's just repaying the favor, basically. And this is how conflict like cycles. So he's saying, yeah, this is Eren talking. I might even destroy the world. I'm a bad guy. But to me, you look like bad guys too. Like, yeah. That day when the wall was destroyed and Titans overran my hometown and killed his mother, I watched a Titan eat my mother right in front of me. I didn't understand. Tell me, Reiner, why was my mother eaten by a Titan that day? He said, because on that day we destroyed the wall. And he said, why did you destroy the wall? He said, to take advantage of the chaos and infiltrate the walls and to see how the king of the walls would react. And what was your mission? This is everybody's mission. This is everybody's excuse for fighting the good fight. To reclaim the founder and save the world, of course. He says, I see. If you were trying to save the world, well, guess you didn't have a choice, did you? Which is why it's such a convenient, oh, it's so insidious. The devil is fucking cunning as shit. Like, if your objective is to save the world, that can pretty much justify any atrocity. He said, I remember what you said back then. If I make sure you guys, he said, I'll make sure you guys suffer the worst death imaginable. That's a promise. He said, isn't that what you came here for? Oh, I guess I did say something like that. Just forget I said that. It's true that there was a time when I saw everyone across the ocean as my enemy. But now that I've crossed that ocean, slept under the same roof as my enemy, and eaten the same food as my enemy, I don't know if I explained this all that much. So, Eren was an Eldian on the islands that was separate from the entire continent. Reiner is actually he's an Eldian citizen in those like segregated communities in Marley, and basically he was forced to go to that island to take it down to fight for his own freedom, basically, and the freedom of his family. But yeah. So this is Eren talking about how he lived on that island his entire life. He really didn't know anything about the outside world, but he came across the world, the ocean, to the main continent, and yeah, like he said, slept under the same roof as my enemy, eating the same food. He says, Reiner, I'm the same as you. Yeah, there are people here that piss me off, but there are good people too. Across the ocean, inside the walls, they're the same. but you were taught that the people inside the walls were demons. That's what they pounded into little kids who didn't know any better. What could a kid like you have done? Tell me, Reiner, you've been suffering this whole time, haven't you? He said, oh yeah, and this is him breaking down, where he basically admits to where like the team that he came with to overtake the island, the mission that ended up getting Eren's mother killed and sparked his hatred. Like they had the opportunity to cancel the mission, but it was actually Reiner who pushed them to continue on. He says, I forced them to keep going. I wanted to be a hero. I wanted people to respect me. Like, yeah, like these are not fighting for good. It's all my fault. It's all my fault your mother got eaten by a titan. I hated. What do you say? Yeah, I hated my blood. And more than anything else, I wish for the eradication of the Eldians. Oh, I think this is the random king talking, doing his speech while they're talking underneath the basement. He says, I can't take it anymore. Please just kill me. Oh yeah, this is the king trying to rally all the other nations besides Marley to fight against this island. He says, I don't want to die. And that is because I was born into this world. We all differ in nationality and ethnicity, but right now, in the face of this gargantuan enemy, the time has come for us to unite as one. Nothing unites a people more than conflict and war, right? He said, so now I ask for aid from those who also want to live. Please join me in living far into the future. He said, with our power combined, we can overcome any hardship we face. He said, I knew it. I really am the same as you. Eren is talking to Reiner now. So please give me your strength. Oh, no, this is the king. Sorry I don't have volume, but there's... this is the subbed version anyways, so they're speaking Japanese, so it's whatever. Says, I've probably been like this ever since I was born. I will keep moving forward until I exterminate the enemy. And that's when he turns into a titan and starts fucking shit up. So yeah, in this one, kind of breaks down the individual, like, Reiner had the opportunity to say no to the battle. He didn't have to be the one to go over to that island and confront them and lead to the people's death. Like, it's just fighting for good does not spread good. It only spreads more suffering. So this is a really good breakdown about this too. So this person, there's 3 people in this scene. So the main one who's talking, Kaya, is talking. She's an Eldian. She lives on the island. These 2 are actually undercover child soldiers for the Marleyan Empire, and they're still under the indoctrination of, oh, everybody who lives here, they're all devils, and we're supposed to be fighting against them. But this girl is really challenging their assumptions. So she's talking about how her mother died. Again, it's the same conflict that Eren and Reiner were talking about, how that whole mission led to all of this destruction. So yeah, she's sitting there and basically watching her mother die. She was alive the whole time the Titan was eating her. Eventually, she stopped screaming. Oh yeah, this is very dark. There's humans outside the walls who think we're a race of demons, right? But I don't really get why they hate us so much. And she's begging them, Mia, Ben, tell me. What did my mother do? Why does she deserve that kind of hate? And she's like, why? You've been slaughtering the people of the world for thousands. Like, this is her indoctrination kicking in. You've been slaughtering the people of the world for thousands of years. She said, thousands of years? You actually forgot about that? For thousands of years, the Eldians used the power of the Titans to rule over and oppress the world. They stole people's cultures, they forced them to bear children, they killed so many people it's impossible to count. Stop trying to play the victim. And she goes, but my mother was born and raised right here. I don't think she's done anything like that. She goes, are you deaf? We were talking about the sins of your ancestors from 100 years ago. She goes, then what sins have we committed here and now? Yeah, like you're telling me about the sins of people who are not us, basically. Like, what did we do now to deserve this? She said, just a little while ago, you destroyed my hometown. My mother was killed 4 years ago. Oh, yeah. So she's talking about when Eren transformed in that last scene, he basically destroyed the capital or wherever that city was, her hometown. So she's got a vendetta against basically what happened to Eren, where Reiner and his team came in to conduct this mission to save their country. It led to his mother's death. It led to Eren's mother's death, and now he hates that country. So Reiner trying to fight that country led to more conflict, Eren, and then Eren fighting back led to more conflict in the form of Gabby. Like, it's just a revolving circle. That's all it is. My mother was killed 4 years ago. That's not her sin. Your ancestors ravaged the world, and she goes, my mother never killed anyone. Tell me, I want a real answer. Why did my mother have to suffer such a painful death? Like, there has to be a reason, right? It has to make sense. Why was my mother? Yeah, she's basically like screaming in her face, like, no, like, come on. And this is where he breaks it down. He's finally, like, he's on the fence about all this, but he basically tells her the truth. The objective of the attack on Paradise Island 4 years ago was a reconnaissance for a large-scale attack. Your mother got caught up in that. She didn't commit any sins at all. So he admits to, like, yeah, he apologizes for it. And she's just like, you leak military secrets to an enemy nation and now you're apologizing? And he goes, thanks for telling me, Ben, but it's wrong for you to apologize for it. You were just born in Marley, that's all. She's a really good, like, caricature of what I'm trying to get at. This whole, like, non-resistance to evil. She chooses not to hate these people, even if Gabby insists on saying that, like, her mother deserved a painful death. Like, it's not your fault. Like, you were indoctrinated to believe these things. She's giving them, like like Jesus says, forgiveness. It's just that simple. So they ask her, how did you survive such a close encounter with a Titan? She said, there was a girl a little older than I am now. She came in with a woodcutter's axe and fought the Titan. What? That's insane. Yeah, she put herself in harm's way just to help me get away from the Titan. Now, this is like, I'm on the fence about this because it's like, metaphorically, like, she did, like, a good thing, and you'll see what I mean in the next clip, but, like, she is technically still fighting, but, like, she's not fighting for herself or for, no, like, I'll explain it later, but basically, like, what she's doing, the fighting the Titan is not what should be exemplified. It's her helping another person from suffering is what should be exemplified. So, yeah. If she were alive, she would do anything to help you too, like she did for me. She said, we've been invited to eat at a restaurant run by someone from Marley. If we take you there, maybe you'll find a way back to Marley. And then they're like, why? Why are you helping us? She goes, I want to be like the girl who saved me. That hits me every time. That is such a good, yes. Like, just, you're not trying to spread more conflict, you're trying to reduce suffering. It's that simple. It's that simple. Why are you trying to get retribution? What? Yeah. um, God, that's one of my favorite scenes. So yeah, this scene, breaks down. They're talking about the girl who made the contract with the devil, or the angel, or whatever divine being it was, and she's like, being ladylike means being a lot like this girl right here. This line explains everything I'm trying to say. It just sums it right up. It's so beautiful. Krista is always thinking about other people because she's so kind. You should try to be like Krista too. Christ. Jeez, I didn't even notice that. Yeah, you should try to be like Christ, bro. And this is what it is. The world is full of pain and suffering. So like you are going to have pain inflicted upon you. You are going to suffer. That is a given. That is an inevitable in this world. Trying to hit water for making you wet, like, no, like, it's it's ridiculous. So she says, so you should live in a way to be helpful and loved by everybody. So I kind of half agree with this line, but this is pretty much what breaks down. Live in a way to be helpful to everyone. Yes, I agree with that. Like, you are not here to create more suffering. You are here to ease the suffering of others. That's not your main purpose here, but like, that's what I can break down like what your main purpose is, but like, that's your main purpose is absolutely not to inflict more suffering. That's all this is, basically. Okay, so there is one thing I wanted to add to this about the whole not inflicting suffering on others. So we're going to look at the trolley problem with this idea. So it's a pretty common thought experiment where it's like you have 5 people on a rail tied down that are about to get run over by this trolley or train, and you have the option to change the tracks to where it only kills 1 person lying on the track instead of killing the 5. So like it's a philosophical experiment where like, obviously, do you let it kill the 1 person, or do you let it kill the 5 people, or do you choose to save them to kill 1? So it's like, how do you value human life type shit. So from this whole perspective, it's from like not inflicting suffering. The typical response most people would give is like, obviously you should change it to kill the 1 person instead of killing the 5 because you saved more lives, right? Not necessarily, because you are not the one who put these 5 people in danger, right? However, when you like physically act and make a conscious decision to change the tracks, that is your action leading to the death of someone else. So it's like, you're not necessarily obligated to help everyone. You're only obligated to not inflict suffering on others. So it's not like you're here to help as many people as you can. It's like you're not here to hurt people. there's two different you have to really like make that distinction. But yeah, I just wanted to interject this real quick, just to clarify it. That pretty much sums it up. Yeah, conflict is bad. Whether you're like, even if you're just trying to, okay, this is where we get into the movie. So like, even if you're just trying to we'll just jump right into it because I don't think I can explain it. um, so this is a perfect example of like conflict, and it's more than just like fighting and violence. It's also like just like the use of force itself. So these people are like, RoboCop movies were rated R movies, which have been watched by every kid during its time. He said, back in those times when men were men, shows and movies were amazing. And he goes, nowadays, SJW program kids would find this stuff too disturbing to the extent that they have to go to their safe space. Like, these people are mocking, these are the same type of people who would say, like, oh, liberals are ruining everything. And it's so easy. And that's the hatred that sparks in Eren and Gabby. That's the hatred that's like you see suffering in the world and pain in the world, and you like attribute it all to one group. You make an enemy out of someone, basically. Like you're looking for an enemy, and that's such a and it's so easy to like make fun of these people too, because it's like they're so like, well, I can't. This is so funny. Sorry, I have to add this. But like as simple as it is as simple as it is for people to be like, oh, obviously these are just like conservatives and they're probably like they're just dumb, and they say what you want. Like, as much as they're talking smack about liberals and SJW policies and stuff like that. Another funny one. Like, you can sit there and sit in like the bubble of like be a liberal and say, oh, all of our problems are conservatives, or you can be a conservative and say, oh, all of our problems are liberals. Whoa, I went too far. Like, it's so easy to do that. And it's so easy to even like just go above that and say you're in a cult. Like, both of you. And then attribute that malice to both of them. Like, I think it's really funny. Yeah, basically. But like, it's as easy and natural as it is for this guy to fall in line and say, oh, all of our problems are SJWs, and decide to engage in conflict with that dynamic. It's just as easy for someone like a liberal to look at this and be like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, and then say they're the problem and they're the enemy, and that's the conflict dynamic. It's also just as easy for someone like me to look at both of them and stand, quote unquote, above the issue and say, well, both of you are the problem. Y'all are the enemy. Y'all are the conflict dynamic that I want to engage with. It's so easy to fall into conflict. What is this from? Three Uses of the Knife by David Mamet. Talks about politics. Like the more traditional drama, the problem in politics is notably imaginary. That is, something which either does not in fact exist or that cannot be eradicated by political action. For example, homosexuals will continue their sexual practices in spite of legislation, just as heterosexuals always have. Like, politics, yeah, I can sit here and be like, well, politics is bullshit, basically. But it's like, okay, but if you're still falling in line with that and saying people who engage in politics are the enemy, like you're still engaging in conflict, so you're also the problem. It's very funny to Like, yeah, this is pretty much sums this up. I've had enough of this ego. So you drop down, and now you have this spiritual ego where you look down on other people, and you're like, oh, you're so egotistical. Why can't you be more spiritual and evolved like I am? Like, it's so easy. It's so easy to fall into conflict. Oh yeah, these are the rest of these are kind of like random, but I just like playing with these ideas too. So it's like a concept, a death god that is actually surprisingly supportive and on the side of the good guys, supporting actions and promoting policies that will lead to the kingdom growing and thriving instead of being destroyed. Because the more the kingdom grows, the more people there are, and the more people there are, the more people will eventually die. And when you're an immortal god of death, there's no need to rush. You'll get them all in the end. So it's like really breaking down this whole like good versus evil. Like, okay, this character would absolutely fight on the quote unquote good side because it's promoting his objective, basically his goal. I think that's really funny. So this is actually breaking down more of like how life is suffering, and this actually breaks down why I'm choosing not to have children as well, because I feel like that's an actual imposition of force on someone else. Like you're inflicting suffering on someone. So he breaks it down. Life is an imposition. It is a gamble played out on behalf of a non-consenting sentient being. To be born is to suffer. To what extent we suffer is determined by an indiscriminate force of nature, not by ourselves or our parents to the degree they naively believe they control. We are propelled into a conscious existence that is forced to accept its futility. Everything gained will be lost, sometimes in the most agonizing way imaginable, sometimes mere years into its realization. Neither good parental intention nor affluence can save us from the indifferent roll of the dice. The horror of existence is granted to us regardless of whether or not we would have accepted it prior to our emergence, given such a capacity. Nature exposes itself as cruel and unforgiving, the conscious subjects of which must discover an optimistic bias in order to perpetuate its subjective existence. Let me repeat that part. The conscious subjects of nature must discover an optimistic bias in order to perpetuate its subjective existence. So the line that people always say, like when I say I don't want children because I don't want to inflict suffering, they're always like, well, life isn't all suffering. It's like, okay, there's good in life and there's suffering in life. I'm not saying like even if the good outweighs the suffering, it doesn't negate the suffering. Like you still suffer. Like it's not a simple like addition problem. Like you experience both. So yeah. The conscious subjects of nature must discover an optimistic bias in order to perpetuate its subjective existence. This is a trap, and we are the captives. Suicide creates yet more suffering for those who depend on and are invested in our existence. So suicide isn't an option because it's also more suffering. It's also inflicting more suffering. The rational choice is not to reproduce, to not perpetuate the DNA replication game that breeds inevitable suffering. Let the unborn bask eternally in the unfeeling neutrality of their non-existence and non-suffering. Do not roll the dice. The gamble is too great. So this is kind of like Nietzsche's words, where he's saying our deepest insights must and should appear as follies, and under certain circumstances as crimes. And also that which serves the higher class of man for nourishment or refreshment must be almost poison to an entirely different and lower order of human beings. Try to explain to someone that you don't think having children is good, and they're going to treat you like you're spreading poison, basically. But again, with conflict, as natural as it is for these people to engage in conflict, it's also just as natural for you to fall in line and argue with them and conflict with them. Like, so as much as like, oh no, Oh no, I have to find it. Okay, as much as so you can sit here and say like, yeah, existence is suffering, and I shouldn't reproduce. But if you take that and engage with other people and say, oh, you're wrong for reproducing, you're what's wrong with the world, boom, more conflict. You're engaging in that dynamic of conflict again. Like it's just that simple. It's so easy to fall into. You have to be very vigilant, or vigilant to be aware of these traps. So yeah. So after the millennia of being poked and prodded by the Sith and Jedi, the immortal galaxy-spanning hive-minded microorganism colony finally said, "Both of you chill," and cut them both down to size. Being immortal, the fact that it happened within the course of decades is a lightning-fast action. This is talking about Star Wars. Midi-chlorians were the microorganisms that supposedly gave Jedi and Sith the power of control of the Force. So basically, they're talking about like, while these people fight for good and evil, like a greater force is just like cutting them down. I thought that was really funny. Conflict. Robin Hood hands over stolen fortune. Here you are, my poor friend. Friend says, wow, thanks, I'm rich. Robin Hood narrows eyes. You're what? The cycle of conflict will always perpetuate. When you transcend duality and no longer see life as good versus evil, I just hope both teams have fun. When you stop fighting for good and realize that the good, not that the good you're fighting for is evil, but that the fighting for the good is evil, then you can actually sit back and relax and just be like, I'm just gonna chill out and try. What did Thoreau say? He said, I did not come into this world chiefly to make it a better place, but to live in it, be it good or bad. And since my life is limited, since I don't have all the time in the world, why should I waste my time trying to do any bad, trying to inflict suffering or evil? Like, if I only have a limited time on this earth, I'm going to spend that limited time, just doing good, just not not engaging in conflict. Civil disobedience. That's one I should have broken down, but this is already getting, like, really long anyways. So, yeah. I believe this is the last one, and it's a pretty good one to finish up with. C.S. Lewis. Was he the Lion Witch in the Wardrobe? I get him and Lewis Carroll mixed up. I'm pretty sure he wrote Lion Witch in the Wardrobe. Lewis Carroll wrote Alice in Wonderland. But yeah. So he says, of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. This is where fighting for good really ends up getting really dicey. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated. But those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience. This is why fighting for good is probably more insidious than trying to fight for evil. I just think it's really funny how, like, fighting for evil, like, how many people actually, like, even if people are, like, fighting for evil, they view that evil as good. Like, people don't view themselves as the villains. So, yeah. He says, they may be more likely to go to heaven, yet at the same time likelier to make a hell of earth. I mean, they do say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Yeah, how many good intentions do you have thinking you're going to try and, like, fight for good? Not realizing you're literally just perpetuating the evil itself. So yeah, that pretty much sums up conflict. This is something that it's so easy to fall into this, and I definitely figured that out over the past year, talking about, because all throughout the years I've I've argued with people online because it's one of my favorite pastimes, whether they're Republican or Democrat, left or right, this or that. Like it's just been like like it's fun to sit there and be like, oh, like you're the problem and like you're doing wrong, but it's like, well, stop, wait, because like doing that is the actual thing that's wrong. Like I said, spiritual ego, watch out for it. Conflict, try not to engage in it. Like she said, the world is full of pain and suffering. You have no obligation to add any more suffering to the world. So just do good. Like don't engage in conflict. I hope this broke it down as much as possible. But yeah, glad y'all stuck with it. Thank you guys.